Welcome to Momming as a Millennial, the podcast where we explore the intersection of tradition and modern parenting. Have you ever felt overwhelmed trying to balance being a mom with your professional aspirations, all while dealing with side-eye from your parents who think you're doing it wrong? Me too. I'm your host, Christine Gerizzo, a journalist, blogger, and proud mama of 2 young children. I'm so glad you're here with me. Together, we can navigate the complexities of millennial motherhood and find what resonates with our true, authentic selves. Let's dive in. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks so much for listening. Today, we are talking about creating an equitable division of labor in the household and with childcare, as well as outside of the home, with both partners sharing financial responsibility and maintaining careers. Let's get right into it. Chores suck. They have a way of sucking the joy out of adulthood just as much as they did when we were kids. I'm sure that you have chores you absolutely hate, and there's ones that you don't mind or maybe you even enjoy doing. And working together with your partner, you should be able to define who does what based on interest, lack thereof, or maybe even a game of rock, paper, scissors. But in my opinion, gender should not play a role in deciding who does what. Let's start with why I'm so passionate about not replicating previous generations' approach to how a house should be run. We've desperately looked forward to being adults, but once we reach that arbitrary milestone, the term adulting has plagued us ever since. Sure, you can relate. There is always so much to do, all the time. It's a never-ending cycle, cleaning all the things, cooking the meals, scrubbing the dishes, doing laundry, paying bills, mowing the lawn, keeping things orderly, purging, switching out the winter clothes for the summer stuff. I just did that this weekend with my daughter's clothes, and it took several hours. When I lived in apartments, it was a whole lot easier. The surface area to clean was much smaller. Anything that broke wasn't my problem. I just had to call the landlord and hope that they dealt with it in a timely manner. Any outside work, landscaping, lawn mowing, weed pulling, all that was taken care of for me. And to top it off, it was just me, myself, and I, one person to take care of. Now I have a house with my husband, and everything is our problem. There's nobody to call, and we have 2 additional humans to clean up after. Oh, the amount of crumbs these little humans make. I cannot fathom that crumbs have become my kryptonite, but that is the reality that I'm living in. Now I completely understand why my dad was always so focused on crummies when we were younger and our lacking abilities to effectively clean up after ourselves and rid our kitchen and dining room of them. I haven't even mentioned the elephant in the room, and that's this thing called employment or a job. That's right. We also have to work to pay for all this stuff that we inevitably have to clean, organize, or someday purge to make way for the new stuff. I saw a reel on Instagram recently where this woman went on a similar rant and then said in her next life, she wants to be a tree. I second that, Insta lady. A tree seems like a wonderful, peaceful existence, doesn't it? Needless to say, I've spent a lot of time thinking about how my future would play out with all of this chores stuff. When I finally got married, had a husband and some children, I would not allow the deluge of chores to rest solely on my shoulders. I would not be responsible for it all. We would divide and conquer on all things. Chores, life responsibilities, anything that came our way, especially, drumroll, children. I am particularly passionate about not being solely responsible for childcare just because I'm the mother. My husband and I got married in our 30s, and we knew we wanted children, and probably sooner rather than later, considering that whole biological clock thing and whatnot. But when children went from a hypothetical situation to a real possibility, I completely panicked. My mom tells me that my dad never changed a diaper, not one diaper for 3 children. I was not planning on changing all of the diapers. I was not planning on being the only one up at night with the baby, breastfeeding or not. It wasn't just going to be me on call for all of the feedings. I never planned to be a stay-at-home mom, and I was going to continue my career. I needed my partner to pitch in and help with the workload so that I can continue to do that. I am fortunate enough that I found a man who completely agrees with my perspective. And when deciding if we were ready to start trying for children, this conversation came up a lot. He always reassured me that it would be 50-50, all hands on deck. We would do it together, whatever that looked like. but I was having a hard time believing him. After a while, I think he started to get frustrated with me, and I really don't blame him at all. And I realized it was because I never saw a relationship where the parenting was conducted in a partnership manner. My mom, my grandmother, my aunts, my cousins, my friends' mothers, in all of these situations, the rearing of the children was mainly their concern. The fathers would come in and out, but the caring for, the feeding, washing, bedtimes, consoling, that was always the mother's. I knew I had to trust my husband and take the leap. He explained how he did have an example of what I was asking for. His father was very much involved with them. He distinctly remembers seeing a video of his dad giving him a bath, something that was a regular occurrence. And I'm guessing if my dad didn't change my diaper, it's likely that he didn't give us baths either. Just because the father figure examples in my life didn't share my perspective on sharing responsibilities and what that looks like, it doesn't mean that I should doubt his commitment to wanting to share those things with me. But I did start to wonder why all those men took a backseat. So let's take a look at the historical context of all of this. This is the fun part for me. I like to look back at history and culture and see why things are the way that they are and why it's so hard for changes to be made. So why was it that I didn't have any examples of men or fathers who shared the responsibilities of caring for their children and keeping a home? The division of labor in households has historical ties to traditional gender roles, and the structure of power within the household is patriarchal. That's why. When I was growing up, my major influences were my parents and my grandparents, naturally, and my grandparents were super traditional. My grandmother served my grandfather meals and cleaned up after him. She maintained the home. She did all of the decorations for the holidays, the laundry, the excessive ironing, all of that. My grandmother would even have my grandfather tell her who she should vote for when they were going to vote in an election. My grandfather did take on a more active cooking and cleaning role as they got older, and because my grandmother had diabetes, her vision and strength deteriorated. But growing up, what I saw was the patriarchal Italian Catholic household. My parents were a bit less traditional. My mom went back to work once we were school-aged, but my father was always viewed, in my eyes at least, as the provider and the breadwinner, while my mom maintained the home and us kids and worked on top of that. And back to the diaper thing with my dad. This just seems so ridiculous to me, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. Did he just not offer? Did she just not ask him? Did she know that he would say no, so she didn't bother asking? Did he feel that it wasn't his place because he wasn't the mother and that was her job? Just so many questions that I fear I will never have the answers to. Anyways, moving on. Historically, women have been responsible for cooking, cleaning, laundry, and child rearing, while the men have been responsible for yard work, keeping the car up to snuff, and dealing with finances and investment decisions. Specifically, when it comes to childcare, being a mother was often integral to a woman's self-definition back in the day. By mothering children, a woman affirmed her identity to herself and to the public. I found in this study called Gendered Identities, Women in Household Work, that the domestic sphere has been assigned to the woman. Mother work, as they call it, is not necessarily a fundamental part of a woman's identity, nor is it necessarily a woman's choice to perform this work. However, childcare has been constructed as work that is gendered female, and not to act as a mother would theoretically call into question a woman's femininity, again, according to the study. There was a whole lot more that this study went into, but essentially what I took away from it is that the reason these gendered roles persist in households today is because women seek the opportunities to perform gender-associated responsibilities in order to affirm their identity as women. So in other words, we're trying to do these things that are quote-unquote women gendered to prove our femininity. And men do the same thing. They're affirming their identity as men and their masculinity by being breadwinners and not helping with childcare, for example. This study threw around terms like gender display and performing gender, something that I'm not going to get into here because it's a lot and I could really go into depth, but definitely going to touch on these things in a future podcast because this was very interesting to me and I think there's a lot there. So stay tuned for what that's going to be in the future. So there are a lot of factors that I think created the stereotype of men as providers and breadwinners and women as the domestic mothering figures. But one of the biggest ones that I think is the lack of higher education that was available for women up until very recently. Women first gained entry into college in 1836, which seems like a long time ago, but it was actually 200 years after Harvard College was founded, and that was the first college in the US for the education of young men. In the mid-1950s, women were still underrepresented at higher education institutions, making up only 21% of college students. And some schools were actually banning women from applying or restricting how many women they would accept by putting quotas in place. In the 1970s, Ivy League schools fought against admitting women because of the distracting effect of women on men's studies. So yet again, here we are, women. We are the problem. We are the distraction. Even women's colleges treated higher education for women as a dangerous experiment. That's right. You don't want those women to get too smart. Watch out. It's a dangerous experiment. It wasn't until 1972, with the enactment of Title IX, where federal law has guaranteed an equal opportunity to learn and thrive in our nation's schools free of sex discrimination. So it was at that time that schools could no longer reject a student because she was female. And it was at that time that my parents were actually graduating from high school. So I wonder if that law wasn't made, if my mom would have been able to get her degrees. She has a bachelor's and a master's. By the 2016-2017 academic year, women earned 57% of bachelor's degrees awarded in the country. So now women are earning more than 50% of bachelor's degrees in our country. And of course, a lack of education translated into a lack of representation into the workforce. According to the U.S. Department of Labor, in 1920, women were about 20% of all persons in the labor force, and today women make up 47% of the U.S. labor force. With these changes and the shared responsibilities outside of the home, it makes sense that there should be a shift of responsibilities within the home as well to accommodate. But the stigma of women as primary caregiver, meal cooker, house cleaner, chauffeur, whatever, has prevailed. I do think that things are moving toward equality, but it just seems like it's really, really slowly. There has been a shift toward an equitable division of chores between men and women over the past 15 to 20 years, but women still do more than their male counterparts, and on top of that, they're still expected to do more. According to a Gallup poll of heterosexual couples who are married or living together, women in the relationship are still primarily responsible for doing the laundry, cleaning the house, preparing the meals, and making decisions around home decor. Women are also more likely to care for children on a daily basis, shop for groceries, and wash dishes. On the other hand, men are primarily responsible for maintaining the vehicle and doing yard work. That list seems a little bit unbalanced, wouldn't you say? The two activities that are most likely to be shared by both partners are planning family activities and paying bills. I'm going to include the link to the Gallup poll in my show notes because it goes into a lot of great detail about the different factors that impact the division of labor in a household, including men and women's perceptions. Men think that they do more, women think that they don't do enough, whether or not it's a single or dual income household, earnings in general, education, and age group. And overall, spoiler alert, younger couples seem to be sticking with those traditional gender norms. Okay, forgive me for one small tangent here. I want to share something that I found while I was researching this topic that actually rocked my world. According to a report from the Urban Institute, which is commissioned by the Women's Bureau, the amount of time spent providing care to children and adults, so caring for maybe aging parents as well, impacts a woman's economic well-being long after the caregiving ends. And in fact, this unpaid family caregiving reduces a mother's lifetime earnings by 15%. So not only are women expected to be the primary caregivers of children and their aging parents if needed, but that expectation has lifelong impacts. I think about women who are single mothers, divorced, or widowed, and they don't have a partner to pick up the slack or make up that 15%. So this unpaid caregiving is a trade-off for actual monetary accumulation that they could have, and they can't make that up. It's gone. So when they get to the point of retirement, they're going to have to budget more, sacrifice more. They're going to have less because of this burden of having this unpaid caregiving throughout the course of their life. That is just crazy to me to see that quantified. Okay, so let's go back to where we stand right now. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reported in 2015 that women spend twice as much time on household chores, such as cooking, cleaning, and laundry, as men do. Now, I know that's 2015 and that's 9 years ago, but where we are, right about 21st century, women are still spending twice as much time on household chores that men do. That leaves me with the question, are we really ready for a more equal division of labor? Do men really want to take on more? I've read a lot about how millennial men have a much more egalitarian attitude about family, career, and gender roles than the generations before them. One article I read talked about how millennial men really want to share the responsibilities of home and kids, but it's the workplace policies that have not caught up to these new ideas, which is why they are not able to step up like they want to. I don't know if you could tell, but I have a whole lot of issues with this. I feel like that's kind of a scapegoat because to me, workplace policy doesn't have any influence on whether or not you get up at 3 a.m. to help with the crying, hungry, or sick child. It doesn't dictate whether or not you take over grocery shopping on the weekend or run the vacuum once in a while. Not to mention that I am also working in those same workplaces with the same workplace policies, but yet I'm expected to do more and you are not. So all that aside, you want to create a more equal distribution of labor in your own house. You want help with chores. You want help with childcare. How do you go about doing that? I can tell you from my experience and my perspective, there are several factors that played into how my husband and I have divvied up our responsibilities. First, there are certain things that I really like to do, like folding laundry. Taking a pile of shirts and pants, socks, towels, whatever it might be, and folding them down into little perfect squares or rectangles and stacking them on top of each other is extremely therapeutic for me. I don't mind it and I actually enjoy it. I don't mind sitting in front of the TV at night with a mound of laundry next to me and get to watch that mound of laundry go from chaos to neat folded piles. And I do that often. Second, there are things that I just prefer to have control of. I am admittedly a type A person. I like to take care of paying the bills, scheduling the appointments for the kids, filling out any paperwork, because I know that it'll be done properly and submitted on time. And that's not to say that my husband couldn't take care of it and do it properly and submit it on time. It's just that it really helps with my mental state, knowing that it's completed and it's all set. And he doesn't mind forgoing that responsibility, so win-win. The third factor that plays into how we've divided up our responsibilities is that I want to set an example for my children. I want them to know that certain tasks are not a man's or a woman's responsibility, but rather anyone could do anything that they want. My husband loves to cook, so he cooks dinner. Growing up, I only saw the women in my family in the kitchens cooking, setting the table, cleaning up after meals. So I'm happy that my children will have a different perspective on that. They see me and my husband partnering with meal preparation. He cooks and I clean up, and they see us working together to accomplish this goal. And finally, as I mentioned before, I don't want to do it all. It's just not fair for one person to habitually be expected to do more than the other. An imbalance in responsibilities can foster resentment and anger toward the other person. Over time, it can lead to arguments and a tit-for-tat mentality that we all know is not a good thing and detrimental to a relationship. But it's not about keeping score with who does what. It's about feeling supported and backed up, like we're in the trenches together. For me, I feel like everything is more manageable and I'm less likely to get burnt out. I know I can tag in my partner if I'm at the end of my rope and everything will be okay. And it fortifies our trust in one another. My husband and I never sat down and made an official list of who would do what, but that could be a very beneficial thing for you and your partner. We did have several conversations about our current contributions and what we wanted to reevaluate, and then what matters in our home and what needs to get done. We discussed what we wanted to do and what we'd rather not do. It's not perfectly divided down the middle, and things have definitely shifted over the years, especially with the addition of children into the mix. They had to change. Sometimes one of us will get sick and the other one has to pitch in more. Life is going to happen. I'm not advocating that you put your foot down and say, I am never going to take out the trash because that is his job. Part of being in a partnership is seeing where there is a need and then filling it. If I see that the trash is full, I'm not going to leave it there until my husband gets to it because we decided that he is primarily responsible for all things garbage and recycling. I'm going to take the garbage out. I'm going to empty the overflowing recycle bin. I want to do these things because of the partnership that we've established. I want to help and have him go, that's one less thing I have to do now. Awesome. Thank you. And he does the same for me. So here's some tips that could help you better divide and conquer. As I mentioned, we never made a formal list, but I think it could be very helpful to make a list of every chore and every errand that's required to manage your home. It'll really help everybody to see the full extent of the responsibilities required. So include those essential tasks like washing the dishes, taking the kids to school, grocery shopping, or mowing the lawn. But don't forget to add the invisible tasks, as I'll call them, like coordinating and attending play dates or writing thank you cards or planning birthday parties and creating the invitations for them. There's so many things that need to happen that might not happen on a regular basis, but they should still be accounted for, especially if one partner is the one who's always taking care of those things. Next, you would go through the list together and note who is typically responsible for each task. I personally like this exercise because I think it could really help to show if there's an imbalance. So actually getting it down on paper or digitally if you prefer, seeing what that division currently looks like. Next, you can go through and prioritize your must-do chores. So that includes those everyday tasks like we've been talking about and activities that are important to you, like scheduling date nights or maybe organizing the basement. And then from there, you can cut those unnecessary tasks that you don't think that you really need to be doing. Or maybe they're things that you only need to revisit once every few months and it doesn't really need to be on this list. Is there anything on the list that neither of you really care about getting done? I used to clean up all the toys all day long just to turn around and have one of the kids pull out what I had just cleaned up or make a new mess. And now, rather than driving myself crazy, I just embrace that the house is going to look like a bomb went off all day long as we can clean it before we go to bed. Next would be assigning the tasks. So you could go through and pick what you like to do, or maybe what you want to have control over if you're anything like me. If there's overlap, you could talk about it, negotiate, and compromise. Maybe you decide you're going to set some time aside and do it together. For the tasks that no one wants, you can flip a coin, or my favorite, you could do rock, paper, scissors, and then you see who takes the first round and you rotate from there. You can create a chart so that it's easy to see whose turn it is to do that particular task that nobody likes, and then just set clear expectations of how and when a task should be done. For example, if you take over vacuuming the living room, but you think that it only needs to be vacuumed every couple weeks or once a month, but your partner thinks that it should be vacuumed every other day or a few times a week, that's going to just create issues down the road because even though you divided up that task, now your partner is going to think that you're not doing it adequately or to their satisfaction. So just get everything out on the table, decide how often you're going to do what. Does cleaning the dining room floor mean Swiffering? Does it mean vacuum? Does it just mean sweeping? Does it mean all of the above? What does each task entail and how often are you planning on doing it? This way, everyone's on the same page and there's no surprises. There are some apps that can help you divide your chores and track your progress and also track whose turn it is to do what if you're rotating. We're not currently using an app to track our chores, but I did some research and I found 3 that are pretty highly recommended. The first one is Nipto, Nipto. The next one is Chap, Chap. And the last one is Toddy. I think I'm saying that right. Tody. So you could take a look at those. And from what I understand, they're shared across devices. So you and your partner could both take a look in real time at what needs to be done, who's on first for what, etc. And then once those kids get big enough, start delegating some of those tasks to them too. My little ones can now make their beds and clean up their plates after meals and then help me put their toys away at the end of the night before bed. So now I'm teaching them responsibility and also getting some help with some chores that neither me or my partner have to do. Just keep in mind here, it's never going to be perfectly equal. It's important to be flexible. And at the end of the day, you just want to help and support each other. It's about the greater good of the family dynamic. And it's not about keeping score of who's done more chores. Alrighty, that brings me to my final thought for today's episode. So just starting off, I never wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. I know that that's coming through loud and clear. Not that I'm knocking that at all. This podcast is all about finding your true authentic self and embracing that. And if being a stay-at-home mom is your true authentic self, wonderful. If you have the financial ability to stay at home, great. If that's something that you want, I love that for you. It's not for me, and it never has been. I also never wanted to be responsible for all of the cooking and the cleaning and keeping the house tidy. And I'm super thankful that I have found a partner who supports my vision of what our family should look like. And on top of it all, he doesn't mind that I'm the breadwinner for the family. So looking at all of these studies and the statistics, it appears as a whole that we are moving toward a more equitable division of labor, regardless of gender, but the shift is moving extremely slow, in my opinion. As I mentioned at the top of the episode, I don't have a lot of men providing an example of what it means to be an engaged father and partner. And in part, I'm referring to previous generations, but also in my generation too. It's not a hypothetical. It is what I see. It's important to strive for equality and fairness in our modern households, regardless of gender. Sharing in household duties improves mental health, it strengthens relationships, and it improves overall well-being. It helps me to feel supported and like I'm part of a team. And when I'm overwhelmed with something, I know that I can turn to my husband and he will willingly jump in and take over for me. One study I found shows that satisfaction with family life is highest for both spouses when men are involved in both childcare and household chores. So it's proven that men and women are happiest in their family life when the men are participating in the childcare and the household chores. There's no hard and fast rules to how any of this should work. And ultimately, I feel like every couple should do what works for them, their family, and their household. It's up to you and your partner on how you want to run things in your house. I just don't think that it's fair that it should automatically be assumed women are going to take care of everything within the home, including the child rearing. I just don't think that that's okay. And there was the recent comment made by the Kansas City Chiefs player who said that a woman's life doesn't begin until she's a wife and a mother, and that's when she's truly fulfilling her purpose for being put on this earth. And I just think that that is very sad that there are still people, this young man, this 25-year-old man, thinks that that is true. And I hope that we could shift our mentality to not be gender-based and to be more of a partnership. And what do you want to do? What do you want to see? How do you want to make it work? Not you're a woman, so these are your responsibilities, and there's no exceptions. I would love to hear from you. Let me know how the labor in your house is divided. Let me know who's taking care of what. I'm really interested in all that. So please message me at contemplativemama1 on Instagram. And please share with your millennial mom friends. I appreciate all of you for listening. Thanks so much, and I hope you have a great day. Thanks for tuning in to Momming as a Millennial. If you enjoyed the episode, please share it with a friend or on social. You can find more from me at contemplativemama.com. Until next time.